Hey, Clemson fans, welcome to the first episode of the Supreme Alway podcast. I'm Bill Zimmerman, and I've been working in sports and news media for, well, let's just say decades. And anytime I haven't been covering Clemson sports or editing stories about it, I've probably been thinking about it.
I'm Daniel Shirley. It's decades for me too, as well. Bill and I graduated from Clemson together in 1993. Doesn't seem like it's been that long ago, but it has. And can't wait to get started here with the podcast. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Bill and I have talked about working together for a long time, and now we're going to have some fun talking Clemson sports.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of weird. We've had these careers in parallel, never actually collaborated together on anything. And, you grew up right in the Clemson area. I've got tons of family right in the, immediate Clemson area. Love to go up there all the time, go to the family reunion. And we've been to a few games together as well. So we've gotten back to campus together now and then. And there is a lot going on in Clemson athletics right now, without a doubt.
There is a lot of news, a lot of change, right? New offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator for football, and a new baseball coach. And it's going to be interesting to see how those moves work out.
Yeah, talk about baseball a little bit, because I've been following that from afar, but I think you've been more on top of it than I have.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a program we both love, right? And we grew up going to games, and you went to a lot of games when we were in school there together, and we thought that Monty Lee was going to be a good hire. And I don't think it was a bad hire, but for some reason the program just could not get to the next level under Coach Lee. And so there was a change there, and you bring in Eric Bakich as the head coach. Really interested to see what he's going to do. I mean, he's done a good job at Maryland. He's done a good job at Michigan. Both programs that don't have the same kind of resources and advantages that Clemson has. And now he's the head coach. He had worked there in 2002. You look at that staff he was on in 2002 with Jack Leggett, Kevin O'Sullivan, Tim Corbin. I mean, maybe one of the best college baseball staffs in the history of the sport. And now he's back as the head coach, and really excited to see what he can do with this program.
Yeah, he's pretty accomplished, and he's the least accomplished of those four guys that were on that staff. I mean, that's strong, right? So I think it was a big move. I know there were some other names out there, and I would have been fine with them, but once I started looking at it early on, when it was clear that Lee was leaving, I was kind of like, this might be the guy. Like, this might be the one. I hope that doesn't jinx it, because I thought Florida did a nice job hiring Will Muschamp, and look how rotten that turned out. But
right.
I'm a big fan, and I'm also encouraged by the pitching coach hire, the guy they lured away from Florida State.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one as well. Look, I talked to people I know in college baseball, former coaches, a couple of media people who cover the sport. Jimmy Bellinger is reportedly is going to be the new pitching coach. I think it just has to become official. From all reports, it sounds like it's a done deal, but it just has to be made official. He did a really good job at Florida State. They led the nation in strikeouts per 9 innings last year. They were in the top 15 in WHIP. And you look at the job he's done there. That's been a problem at Clemson the last few years. The pitching has really struggled, and even especially in the ACC, it has really struggled. So this is a guy that you take from one of your rivals in Florida State and you bring him to your program, and it really looks like Eric Bakich is putting together a first-class staff.
I sure hope so. One other podcast I'm kind of overdue listening to, and I'll give them a shout out, is the Clemson Dubcast, and they had Leggett on a while back. Jack Leggett, that longtime head coach, took over for legendary Bill Wilhelm, who was on campus when you and I were there, and I really like to hear I know things didn't end like terrifically when he left, but apparently since that podcast was recorded, there's some indications that he may be kind of doing a little Steve Spurrier at Florida role, kind of, I think a little more friendly, since he knows Bakich better, and maybe a good resource. I don't know, maybe more of a Brad Scott type role for him, right?
Yeah, and look, I think I thought at the time that it was time for a change when Coach Leggett was there. The program had slipped, but I didn't realize that things had gotten as untenable as they had between the leadership and Coach Leggett. I didn't know he hadn't been back in the Clemson baseball facility, which he helped design, by the way. So wow. I didn't know that until I heard the news conference from Coach Bakich, and it's a great thing to have Coach Leggett back involved with the program. even if it is just he's just around, right? He doesn't have an official title. He doesn't have, he's not going to be a part of the staff officially, but just to have him around the program, I think is a great thing because he did great things with that program. Even if, again, like me, if you thought it was time for a change, you acknowledge what he did and say, okay, he did a lot of great things. He needs to be around that program, even if he's not the head coach anymore.
Yeah. So a lot more to come with that baseball team. They'll round out that staff, I guess, a hitting and fielding assistant and, some kind of consultant type analyst role, which I've heard all kind of crazy rumors. I'm not going to bother repeating those because it can get a little weird, but I'm looking forward to seeing how they set it up and then, jumping into the spring once they get over to Doug Kingsmore and you start hearing those aluminum bats ring out. I guess you can hear two sets of aluminum bats ringing out now with softball and baseball at the same time, and we'll get into softball in a future episode as well. So let's jump over to football, though. I mean, this podcast is going to mostly be about football. I think you and I are kind of in agreement on that, and I think that's for better or for worse, that's what most people focus on when it comes to Clemson sports. And right now, the fireworks are all around this recruiting class in this huge month of June. They have had 11 of their 14 commits have come on board during this month of June. They had one in late May as well. There were a couple I was expecting and even thought maybe were silent. But what's your kind of overall impression of this rush that they have had with June recruiting?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because for the longest time, Dabo Swinney and his staff, they didn't do official visits during the summer. They had to be during the season. That was kind of their I wouldn't say rule, but that's the way they did things. And now things have changed in college recruiting, and you have to adjust. And you see how Dabo has adjusted. I know Grace Rayner, for us at The Athletic, who I work for, did a really good piece about this going into the month of June of Dabo's changing, he's adjusting. It's a good thing that he's done that. And then you look how it played out this month, and you see guys like Avion Terrell and AJ Hoffler and D. Creighton and Ian Reed and just all Vic Burley, all these names who have jumped on board in this month. I think that it played a big part in that. And they had the big weekend where they had like 30 visits that weekend, and
I think that's right.
Commitments have been from that weekend. So it just shows you that you have to adjust and be able to do those kinds of things. And Dabo Swinney and his staff, a no-look staff, right, with 2 new coordinators and a bunch of new faces on the staff, or at least in new places, they've really taken advantage of that this month.
Absolutely. It kind of had that big meeting you're talking about, kind of had that all-in cookout feel to it. You saw the big names building up. If you're reading sites like On3 or Rivals or 24/7 and seeing, hey, so-and-so's going to be there, so-and-so's going to be there. And just you run right down that list and they've got what, a third of those guys? I mean, you reach a Hall of Fame in Major League Baseball with that batting average. So Terrell was one of the guys I expected, being a legacy guy with Mike Reed being able to put his big brother into the first round of the NFL draft. And in year 2, he really broke out as a standout NFL, talk about Revis Island. Maybe it's AJ Island, right? Maybe we can't call it Terrell Island because maybe there's going to be an Avion Island someday too. But his tape looks fantastic, and you always have to take the tape with a grain of salt because you're not seeing the busted coverages or the dropped passes for receivers or the interceptions from quarterbacks. But you can kind of look through and say, hey, this guy's form looks this way, and he just looks natural, or he's got a certain determination about him. You can kind of sift through. And the other one I really expected was Vic Burley. And that was as soon as we hired Nick Eason, as I saw they were distant cousins. And I thought, well, family first, right? And boy, what an impact a lot of people are talking about with Coach Nick Eason taking over for Todd Bates and just bringing guys in. And the defensive line has been fabulous. Stefan Green, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. AJ Hoffler, Vic Burley, we mentioned, and possibly more to come. Oh, David Ojigbe was in April as well. I think that may have been before Eason was hired. I'm not real clear on the timing there, but you've got 4 defensive linemen. It's going to be a huge position in need, and there's some, crystal balls out there, or other guys just kind of rumored to be coming to Clemson?
Yeah, and you look and see this is a position, like you said, it's a position of need because there's going to be so many guys going to the NFL off of this group that they have now. So, it's going to be a spot where they have to find some talent for the next couple of years. It looks like they're doing that. One of the questions of this new staff was how would Wes Goodwin recruit? And I think we're seeing that pretty well. And Coach Easton has been strong in the recruiting. So, they're off to a great start. We'll see if they can continue that. Maybe add a couple of more big names. They've got the quarterback in this group with Christopher Vizina, so they look good at quarterback. They look good on the defense. On the defense overall, all three levels: linebacker, safety, cornerback. Secondary, defensive line. I'd like to see a couple more offensive linemen. Sounds like there could be maybe some running backs, and a couple more receivers as well.
Yeah, and one mention real quick about Wes Goodwin. You've got a couple linebackers in there already. You mentioned D. Creighton. Jamal Anderson's another one. That should be a familiar name to some football fans out there, right? Son of an NFL running back. So kind of a legacy player there, if you will. But they also probably could have had Tony Rojas if they're going to have a third take on this class. And even some of the folks in the message boards were like, well, why'd we take so-and-so late last year when we could have had Rojas this year? But you got to have that depth. I kind of anticipate maybe a guy or two transferring out of that linebacking core. Guys have been waiting their turn. And I think once they see those first 3 or 4 games, Goodwin's going to have a real challenge to either get 6-7 linebackers on the field in those games, maybe even more, or risk losing some of them to the portal after week 4. We've seen that before. So it's going to be interesting to see him make the snaps go around that linebacker group because it is deep and it is talented. Keith McGuire impressed me in the Cheez-It Bowl. Vontae Bentley kind of had the form that I've been waiting to see from him and was looking more reliable. Jeremiah Trotter broke out a little bit. Barrett Carter earned a ton of snaps. We all know what Trenton Simpson is, so he's probably going to be a first-round pick. There's 5 guys right there. How is a guy like Sergio Allen going to crack through behind them? How are some of those other veterans and those lettermen going to earn snaps? So it's going to be interesting to see, and maybe that's where taking TJ. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his last name.
Yes.
Thank you. And then getting Kobe McLeod late last year, TJ Dudley, I'm sorry, last year's signing, TJ Dudley and Kobe McLeod, like they may end up providing some very necessary depth if guys like Sergio Allen are like, hey, I appreciate all my time here, but, maybe I should go in some other footsteps. So.
Yeah, and what you have seen from this coaching staff, Bill, is if you deserve chance to play, they're going to let you play, right? They're going to find snaps. If you've done everything you're supposed to do in practice and you're doing what you're supposed to do in games, you're not going to sit. You're going to play. So maybe they spread it around enough and keep guys fresh too. They if you've got enough depth, and it looks like there's plenty of depth on this defense. So, but I do like what we've seen. I've seen a couple of complaints of why doesn't this class have more offense? Well, this class needs to be heavy on defense because so many guys are going to be leaving for the NFL this year and next year. And this class needs to be defense heavy, and so far it has been. They're going to add a couple more pieces to the offense as well, but you see what they're doing defensively, and it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. And I do think that, things are starting to look like they do have a couple more offensive linemen to add to this class. I think the trouble they had at O-line last year is really hurting offensive recruiting all the way around. If you're a running back, why do you want to be behind a suspect O-line? If you're a receiver, right, why do you want to be at a place where the quarterback is either having to rush or throw over his guys because there's no passing lane opened up? I mean, guys, these guys didn't just fall off turnip truck. These recruits, they know what it takes to be successful. And if they see that and there are question marks there and there are other places that are more steady, I mean, you can't blame them for looking around. But the other thing I really like is Vizina, Noble Johnson, a lot of these guys. I've seen Avion Terrell on Twitter. I've seen Vic Burley on Twitter. AJ Hoffler is a big one on Twitter and Instagram. They are out there recruiting and trying to get more guys in. They want Peter Woods. They want on the defensive line. They want Zechariah Owens on the offensive line. Harris Sewell, I think, is another one, has a commitment date now, and people are atting him all the time. We should not be adding recruits, but these guys can add each other and kind of recruit each other. And so let's see how this class can continue to grow, because at 14, sounds like what people are saying, there's probably another good 10 or spots so to go.
Yeah, they're not done. Please don't tweet at recruits. Don't do that. Let's stay away from that. If you're a fan, let's not make that a practice, because it's a little bit too much. But I don't think they're done by any means. And you see some of these guys talking about, we're going to be the #1 class, and we're going to have this special class. And the one thing, you can question coaches all you want, and believe me, we do, and I do, and I don't think anybody wants to see my text chain with Bill during games. You can't question the recruiting by this group, and I know that there's a lot of new faces with Wes and Brandon taking over as the coordinators, and Kyle Richardson as the tight end coach, and Coach Venables is no longer there, and all these moves have been made. But Coach Easton is really impressive on the defensive line. He knows what it takes to get to the NFL. He knows what that means. And, he's only been in college for a short time, but he can really coach defensive line. So I don't think there's a problem there. And I think even though the coaching staff has a new look, that I think you trust what Dabo Swinney's doing. You trust his vision. Some people saying Thomas Austin doesn't have enough experience, or they should have hired a more experienced offensive line coach. Well, that's what Dabo has done in the past. He has grown these coaches up through his staff, and it has worked for the most part. It worked with Jeff Scott. It worked with Tony Elliott. It's worked with some of these other coaches. I know that Coach Venables was brought in from Oklahoma, but at that time, there were some Oklahoma people who wanted him to not be part of their program anymore. And how well that worked out. So I think you just have to trust Dabo and what he's doing with the coaching staff, and that they're going to be just fine coming up in this season and with this recruiting class.
Absolutely. And hopefully what Nick Eason's doing can kind of rub off a little on CJ Spiller. They do need to get a running back. If they can get Cobb, that would solve the problem there. But we don't have to be in a rush for that to happen. Yeah, even Noble Johnson was on Twitter saying, hey, we could use one more wide receiver, as he was doing some of that recruiting on Twitter kind of stuff. But we do have another hole to fill, or, I shouldn't say we. Coach Grisham has another hole to fill because of that decommitment of Nathaniel Joseph, who I guess as we are recording this is expected to announce his second commitment of this offseason, and that it will be Miami. So it'll be interesting to watch that unfold. Who are they going to go after? Get a guy with good hands, and I'm pretty happy, because I think Swinney and Grisham can teach them the rest once they get on there, and hopefully keep them healthy, which has been a big problem with that receiving core. So we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of time left to go. Sometimes there's something to be said for late momentum. We never expected Travis Etienne to become what he became as a late guy, replacing someone who didn't make his grades, apparently, as the story goes. You have a bunch of defensive guys turn pro early one year that wasn't expecting. What does that turn into? That turns into Kayvon Wallace and Trayvon Mullen, and by the way, a guy named Isaiah Simmons who made a few good plays. So there's no need to be impatient about it. It's a good looking group so far. There's more guys, lined up as possible or projected commitments coming, and then you got to hang on to those commitments. So we'll see how it goes from here on out. I haven't seen anyone from IMG on the list yet, so I feel pretty good about hanging on to these guys.
I agree. And, you mentioned, look at Grady Jarrett. Bill, I remember when Grady Jarrett signed, and he was like the last player in that class, and there was a lot of talk of, why are we signing him? Why are we taking him? He's only a 2-star. Well, look what he became. I mean, he's one of the players Clemson ever had. He's a great player in the NFL. I think you have to trust the coaching staff as far as evaluating talent. Don't worry about their stars on the websites. Those people on the websites, they do a great job evaluating and giving stars and all those things, but that's not the end all be all. Once you get to school, you have to develop, and these coaches have shown they know how to develop talent. As far as running back, you mentioned that. These kids are smart. They know that there's a Will Shipley and a Phil Maffa and Kobe Pace on this roster, there might not be a whole lot of playing time at running back this year. So maybe they don't get the running backs they want this year, but maybe they get them next year in that class next year as some of those guys begin to move on.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not going to worry too much if we're number 1 or number 15 or where we are in there. If these coaches are happy with who they're getting, you kind of have to trust that, because the bulk of those 2016, 2018 titles were not won with top 3 classes. They were won mostly with lower rated classes, 8th through 12th, 14th, those kind of rankings. It depends on the service, depends on the year, but this coaching staff knows the makeup that they're looking for. And those evaluators that you mentioned, people at 24/7, people at Rivals, people at On3, people who I worked with at ESPN who are still doing this, they know what they're doing, and they give us a lot to dig into and what to enjoy reading and setting expectations, but it's only the first chapter of that book. There's 3, 4, 5 years for those guys to develop. Some guys develop late, like Cornell Powell or Mark Fields. Some guys kind of never do, but a lot of those stars overall, when you have the big picture of good classes, that's when you have a chance to contend. Recruiting isn't unimportant. Recruiting isn't just, a dog and pony show. It's something to enjoy. And I'm always glad to see people interested in it.
Oh, I love it. I love, you mentioned Vic Burley. Living here in Middle Georgia, I've seen Vic Burley play several times in person. He's as talented a defensive lineman as I've seen in high school. But once he gets on campus, he has to continue developing. That's not the end, right? When you commit, okay, I'm there, I'm done. That's it. No, you have to continue to develop, and then you get ready to play in college. And I think they're going to be just fine with this group. I like what I've seen from this group so far. We'll see if it continues. Again, once you get the quarterback, and it feels like Clemson has the quarterback in this class, you really can build a lot of things off of that class, and it kind of spins off of that. And they've done well there. They've done well with the defense. Again, a couple of holes to fill, but there's still 6-8 months in this class. I mean, even December is not the end. I mean, there's still a couple of more months to February. So, and we saw Clemson be very busy last year, this past January and February. When maybe some guys decommitted in the December part of the class, that they added a couple of people late, and those players, maybe some of them weren't superstars or 3 stars or whatever, somebody might be overlooking them. A couple of those guys are going to turn out to be really, really good college players, and you'll look back on that and say, boy, why were they only quote unquote 3 stars? It's because there's just, you can't be right about every prospect out there, and some are going to develop later, like you said, than earlier. So just have to let the process play out.
Yep. So it's going to be exciting. Definitely follow those 4 major sites for recruiting updates, and check back with us. We'll get into a little bit of analysis as well. You can follow us on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff. We'll be retweeting some of that hard work that is out there. Support those sites. Go read their links. Find a subscription that you feel comfortable with, and keep that industry going, because they provide a lot of entertainment and fun for Clemson football, and really for all of college football. So we'll keep you posted on things as they unfold, and I think we'll probably do another recruiting dedicated episode before lead up to Georgia Tech, and we'll see where things picked up from there. So let's get into one last topic to close out on. And you mentioned a lot of coaches in turnover around the Clemson football program, but the entire Clemson athletic program had a change at the top with Dan Radakovich departing. There were some rumors that he was going to retire. Turns out he went to Miami, but also the rumors had it even more correct that Graham Neff was the guy who was in place, in-house, ready to rise and take over at the helm of the athletic program at Clemson University. And boy, he jumped right in, having to replace Monty Lee, having to make a decision on whether or not to keep Brad Brownell in charge of the men's basketball team. And then there's a lot going on around campus physically, as well as those personnel decisions.
Yeah, I mean, well, physically, you look at the new scoreboard with the football stadium. That thing is going to be huge, and hopefully it's ready by the first home game. They do play that, like you said, the first game at Georgia Tech over in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But Um, I'm really impressed by what I've seen from Graham so far. I have been as critical of the basketball program as anybody. So much so that I'm sure Bill at times has like, why is this idiot still texting me about the basketball program? I'm going to mute him so I can't see all these texts. But Graham made a decision that the basketball program was not getting the support that he thought it deserved to be successful, and so they had two assistant coaches leave. They make two assistant hires. They pay and increase the salary for the assistant coaches, and he made a decision. Now, will it be the right one? We'll find out, and that's why the games are played, and that's why we keep score, right? So, but he made that decision, and then so there were a lot of people, Bill, and I don't know if you saw this on sites. I know I did. Of well, he's not going to make a change at basketball. Why would he make a change at baseball? And if you've been around Clemson athletics, you know that there are higher expectations for the baseball program than the basketball program. And he made a pretty decisive change with baseball. And it was, look, Clemson had its first losing season last year since the 1950s. That's not good enough. Well, you better get to the NCAA tournament this year. And he didn't get to the NCAA tournament this year. That's not good enough. So he made a pretty decisive change. And you heard Coach Lee say it. Look, you have to get the job done. And I'm sure that he thinks that given more time, he could have gotten the job done, but he admitted we did not produce. And it is a production-based business. And so now there's a new coach with the baseball program. And I've been really impressed by what I've seen from Graham so far. He's made hires with the new lacrosse program and the new gymnastics program, and we'll see if those are the right hires. We'll see if the baseball is the right hire. But I've been really impressed by what I've seen from him through the first few months of his tenure.
Yep, coming up on, well, I guess it just crossed the 6-month mark as we're recording this. According to ClemsonTigers.com, he was named AD on December 23rd, which probably put a few extra gifts under the Christmas tree in the Neff household at the last minute there, some fun Christmas Eve shopping. But where would you grade Graham Neff? I'm putting you a little spot on the spot that we didn't talk about this before we punched record, but I feel like, so far out of the gate, you're not going to reinvent the wheel in 6 months, and you don't want to, I don't think. So, I'm tempted to give like B+, A-. I think you and I would have liked to see something more decisive with men's basketball. But he also has done a nice job, I think, with the baseball hire. Facilities are going to be a big deal. That was a big deal under Radakovich, and it's kind of nice that there's some projects sort of in progress right now that he can cut his teeth on. I'm sure he hasn't been a total stranger to facilities projects in his time there, but now he's kind of like all eyes on him, right?
Yep.
Those beams didn't show up, or the brick and mortar didn't show up. Well, what do we do? Go talk to the man in charge. So he's going to have a different role coming up in that way. But what do you think? I feel like B+. You can kind of rip that apart as you see fit.
No, I think you're right. I would say a strong B+, maybe even a little bit of an A, even though, again, I disagreed with the basketball program move and not making a change. I believe I've told you that. I felt like there should have been a change the last couple of years. But if he's going to say we haven't given this program the resources it needs to be successful, then you've got to give the program the resources. And you see what they've done with the salaries for the new coaches. I think they're going to continue to do those kinds of things. If you think that Brad Brunell hasn't been successful, as successful anyway, as you want him to be because of resources, then you have to give him those resources. And he's done that. There are some facilities things out there. Again, you mentioned Dan Radakovich. That's his thing. He's good at facilities. He was that way at Georgia Tech. He was that way at Clemson. I'm sure he'll be that way at Miami as well. And he's got a big challenge down there with facilities. But Clemson is building, lacrosse facilities. They're doing stuff for the gymnastics program that will, mostly compete in Little John for sure. But they're going to need room for locker rooms and those things. The other sports, they're already talking about adding on to the softball stadium, which has been a huge success.
Yeah.
The first couple of years. So Graham's going to have to get those things done. And it's like in these facilities, Bill, you say, okay, now we're done. And then 5 schools pass you. And you have to continue to, you can't ever be quote unquote done with facilities in college sports these days. But I like what he's done so far. Again, we'll see if the Eric Bakich hire is the right hire. I think both of us like it, but we'll see once they start playing games.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Anything else going on that we have neglected to bring up for this episode? We'll have more coming at you down the road, but
no, I think we're good for this first one. And I think this was a great start, right? And then we'll be back, a couple times a week, right? As we work our way through this.
As I tend to say, that's the dream. Yeah, we've kind of got a little schedule nailed down, or sketched out, I should say, of a couple episodes a week, and hopefully we'll keep them a little shorter than we kept this one. But I think there's so much going on with recruiting, so much going on with Clemson athletics overall, that I like that we were able to do a couple quick hits and then kind of dig in on that recruiting as well. So hey, look, Clemson family, we are glad you found us. Thanks for giving us your time, and hopefully we've been entertaining and informative. Hit us up in the comments, hit that follow or subscribe button so that you won't miss out anytime we post. Give us a like if you like what you're hearing. Heck, give us a like if you just kind of neutral on us, and then hit us in the comments and say, hey, how about this? How about that? Give us some idea, because give us some ideas about what you're looking for, because we can, sort of shift gears based on what people are looking for. We're on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff. We're on Facebook at Supreme Alway. And until next time, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Enjoyed it.
Go Tigers.